I didn't really set out this year with a goal of seeing 400 species. We have pretty much 3 full days in the park. We just go where the birds are, kind of depending on what's passing through at that time. You get some people it's their first birding tour, and they're very keen and they're really eager to learn more. And then there's some people that have literally traveled around the world birding and are coming on these tours. People that are newer to birding and don't have as much experience, you can really teach them a lot, and they pick up on things really quickly, and you can see that even over the course of the tour. One's birding will improve quite a bit. So yeah, the year started off with a bit of a bang, but ended up seeing a few more birds on the west coast with some friends out there. My guiding season didn't really fully kick off until May, when I went to Point Pelee, and that's always a fun trip. I really enjoy that. I think out of all the provinces in Canada, Alberta might be the easiest one to see over 300 species in a year in, just because a lot of birds are reliable on territory and you can go and stake them out pretty easily. And there are a lot of people that get out there and see over 300 species regularly each year. One thing we did that was really interesting was we went out on a boat into the river, and we were able to get up to these flocks of water birds fairly close. We had a gyrfalcon fly by. We were looking at rosy finches, and gyrfalcon came right below eye level and just flew over an open field.
Well, spring migration is coming to a close. I've been busy all the month of May birding in Point Pelee, Long Point Provincial Park, Rondeau Provincial Park, gone to Toronto, where I just saw a Western Kingbird at Humber Bay East and a Western Grebe at Colonel Samuel Smith Park, which was, for the longest time, my birding patch. Now my birding patch is here in Branford. We call it Gilkison Flats, and I enjoy birding there, but not quite the same as Colonel Sam. That was always my favorite spot to be during spring migration. And of course, that's where the Whimbrels have passed through on migration. Although this year, weather and other circumstances made it a disappointing Whimbrel Watch in Toronto. I got to see Whimbrels in Essex County, not far from Point Pelee, so I got my fix of Whimbrels, and I got to see them in Chatham, Kent, near Rondeau Provincial Park. Actually the same place that I had not long before seen a yellow-headed blackbird, just after seeing a crested caracara, which was probably the highlight of the season and Canada lifer for me. But now it's time to get back to the podcast, and today we have a lovely guest whose name is Gavin McKinnon, and he was the birder who in 2022, being in Alberta, gave me a few tips and tricks to get some songbirds in southern Alberta, like the lark sparrow. And I noticed during the course of last year, he was getting close to 400 species, and then I saw him pass 400, and that is an excellent number. And I wanted to know a little bit more about Gavin, because he is such a knowledgeable birder, about see what it took for him to get to 400. Now, we did do the chat before the end of his year. He had already passed 400 species, and I will follow up with him at a later date during the Big Year podcast on the road. So let's get on with the show and dial up Gavin. We don't go back very far, but we do go back to 2022, when I was doing my big year and would not have got 4 species down in southern Alberta without your advice.
Yeah, I remember you reached out to me in, I think it was late 2022, and you were going to come up here. I forget what the 4 species were. I remember
you sent me right to the border. They're all songbirds, like lark, bunting, and all 3 or 4 of those were birds I had never even seen in Canada. But I did not get the grouse. But
there's greater sage grouse.
Yes, you held out hopes that I might get one, but didn't guarantee anything.
Yeah, there's no real spot that you can go to reliably see them in Canada anymore.
So
it's a tough one to get.
Yeah, and that part of Alberta, right next to the border, was interesting because it was a weekend and the border crossing was closed, and I don't know how many people are monitoring cameras, but I went along the road parallel to the border, and it seemed like I could have just, if I had gone into the trees looking for owls, I could have been on the other side of the border. And would anyone notice?
My dad used to work on greater sage grouse down in that area, and there was a time there's a border road down there, and he'd be tracking sage grouse, and we'd sometimes just not even know it, and you'd cross over to the US, and they would come and ask you questions pretty quickly. So
I was worried about that, so I stuck right to the edge of the tree line and no further, because I didn't want to end up being one of those people. But I assume they understand it when it's just a guy with binoculars and a camera looking for grouse.
Yeah. for sure.
So you are quite active as a birder and regularly are able to see hundreds of species in Canada every year. And this year you're over 400. And do you call that a big year, or do you call that just typical year of birding and guiding?
I wouldn't necessarily call it a big year. It's just happened that way. I didn't really set out this year with a goal of seeing 400 species. I spent, just due to the nature of my job, spending a lot of time in good birding areas at the right times of year. So I've been out on both coasts. I spent time in southern Ontario at Point Pelee. I think in Alberta I have pretty easy access to a lot of boreal breeding species and species in the mountains and then the prairies as well. So all that put together really helps out throughout the year to get a higher list.
And now that you've seen that it's very doable, have you considered going all out for 450 or more?
To be honest, I haven't really thought about it too much like that. It's more of I'm out there birding for the year and I see what I see. There are some species that I'm still missing this year. I haven't seen a short-eared owl, for example, and it hasn't really been a big year. It's just been me being in the right places at the right times and seeing most of the birds that are supposed to be there. I wouldn't necessarily call it a big year, and I certainly haven't really considered doing a full-out Canada big year. I think it would be fun, but with the job I have now, it just wouldn't really be possible to be able to go and chase
those extra 50 birds.
Extra 50 birds would be really tough.
They're the expensive ones. You have the luxury of being able to guide people. And how much of your birding this year has been guiding and how much was traveling on your own?
I would say that most of it is guiding. It's certainly the travel. Around Calgary, I'll definitely go out and bird on my personal time quite a bit. But across the country, I spent time in New Brunswick and Ontario. I was up in Churchill in June, in the prairies and up in Cold Lake. The one major area that I didn't get to this year was the Okanagan, and I probably got a few extra species if I would have been there at the right time of year. So I missed quite a few species there, but I've been on both coasts and I did a pelagic on both coasts. So that really helps. And then being at Point Pelee in the spring definitely is a boost too.
And how long were you there?
I was there, I want to say, from May 5th to around the 16th.
Were you guiding for Pelee or were you doing a private tour?
I guided a private tour for a couple of days, and then I had a tour through my own company, Meadowlark, for 5 days. I wasn't guiding for the park.
And do you find that you have a very specific set of destinations in the park and places that you take people on specific days and looking for birds, especially mid-May when you get to some of the rare birds that start showing up?
It definitely depends on the day and what's happening in the park. But we have a list of places that we like to make sure we get to all of them throughout the tour. Like Point Pelee, we do the tip, obviously, Copegarin Woods, just outside the park, and Hillman Marsh, Wheatley Harbor, and then on the last day of the tour, we go up to Rondeau and spend the morning in Rondeau. We definitely cover a lot of ground in the park. We have pretty much 3 full days in the park. We just go where the birds are on those days, and kind of depending on what's passing through at that time.
If a rare bird shows up way over on the other end of the park, like we had a Bell's Vireo in 2022, are you able to take the group and say we're going up to West Beach to see a Bell's Vireo, or is that just not something that can be built into a tour?
On that tour, it really is built in. It's probably not I'm not getting there as fast as I would if I was just on my own work, but we still do chase those rare birds. We did see that Bell's Vireo with a group that I was with there in 2022.
Oh, excellent.
So yeah, we definitely get out and see some of those rare birds, but we're not spending every morning at the tip waiting for the rarities on reverse migration necessarily. We're more working our way through the trails and getting better looks at things that way.
What percentage of people on your tour groups are very experienced birders, or do you get a lot of beginners that really don't know the places that you're visiting and are using it more as an education to see things that they wouldn't be able to see on their own?
It's a huge range. You get some people it's their first birding tour and they're very keen and they're really eager to learn more. And then there's some people that have literally traveled around the world birding and are coming on these tours. So there's a wide range of experience levels a lot of the time. And I think that really is a good thing about it, is people are also willing to share amongst the group, help each other out. And I think that's a really great part of it.
I've never been really comfortable doing group trips, but there have been occasions where we will be on trips and we'll hire a guide if we're in Panama or something. But if there's other tour groups going through at the same time, you appreciate the fact that one random person in a group is going to spot a bird that no one else might have seen.
Yeah, there's more sets of eyes in the group with a larger group. So people will pick up on stuff that maybe nobody else did and they might see something move or fly out of a tree when everyone else is looking in the other direction. So yeah, you can definitely pick up on some things that you might have missed if you were just on your own.
And personally, when you're guiding, what gives you the most pleasure? Is it when you have new keen birders who are seeing things for the first time, or do you enjoy having experienced birders that can help with identifications? And if you had to pick one group, which one would you feel you would enjoy more on a trip?
I don't know if I could pick one. They're both having people that are still learning things. Or everyone's still learning things, but
That's true.
people that are newer to birding and don't have as much experience, you can really teach them a lot, and they pick up on things really quickly. And you can see that even over the course of the tour, one's birding will improve quite a bit. But when you have more experienced people that have been around before and they're looking for one or two species, and when you're able to find those species, that's also very rewarding. I'd say I couldn't really pick one. I enjoy them both. A lot of the time when you're looking for that one bird, you're going to see a lot of other things along the way too. So that's what I try and do. A lot of people that come out to Calgary generally have similar target species. I know the areas well where they are, and we can go out there and bird around those areas as well as look for that species and see a lot of things on the way too.
And what are some of the more requested birds?
In the spring and summer, it's mainly prairie species. Thick-billed longspur, chestnut-collared longspur, pipit, Baird sparrow are ones that come up a lot. A lot of people from the east, even things like yellow-headed blackbird, you can see them in ponds right near the airport here, and teal, American avocet, a lot of species that you don't see necessarily in the eastern part of the continent. And then if people are coming for the west coast, it's a little bit different. Species like rose-breasted grosbeak and least flycatcher and blue-headed vireo, people are really interested in Cape May warbler.
It's fascinating to hear that because those are birds that we just take for granted here.
Absolutely.
I even remember in Arizona, there was a rare dove that I was trying to get a good look at in a tree in Patagonia State Park. And there's another woman looking in the tree. And I said, "Are you looking for the dove as well?" And she said, "No, look at that cardinal bird. Isn't it beautiful? It's so red." And I'm thinking, there's a code 5 dove in the tree and you're excited about a cardinal, but that's just bias on our part because we know cardinals, and if you come from Britain, that's a glorious bird to see.
Absolutely. I grew up in southern Ontario in Guelph and moved to Calgary about 10 years ago and went to high school in Calgary. But out here we don't have cardinals, and cardinals in southern Ontario are very common, but here we have black-billed magpie, or you don't really have black-billed magpies, so it's interesting depending on where you are, how people's perspectives on certain birds change.
Getting back to your travels across the country, so how did the year start and how did you end up booking all these trips across the country?
So yeah, the year started off with a bit of a bang. Until April, I was in school. I was going to school at Lethbridge College. Lethbridge is about 2.5 hours south of Calgary, just north of the Montana border. So I was going to school there, and I had a few days off at the beginning of January, and there was a pinion jay seen in Vancouver. So that one was being fairly reliable. So I think I had 5 days off. So I decided I'd drive out there and see if I could find it. Went out there, and it took a good 6 hours of waiting and pacing around the neighborhood, but finally found it late in the afternoon. So I started off by seeing some birds in the west coast, which definitely was a bit of a pad on my year list. Coming back to Alberta, is we might only get 60 or so species by the end of February if you're birding pretty hard for those 2 months. We're not getting high lists out here in the winter. And after that, I was in school. I led some owl tours around Alberta, finding species like great gray owl, northern hawk owl, snowy owl. Those are all usually pretty reliable in Alberta, so I was able to see all of those in the winter. And then in early April, I went out to the coast again, attempting to do a pelagic that ultimately was canceled due to weather, but ended up seeing a few more birds on the west coast with some friends out there. My guiding season didn't really fully kick off until May, when I went to Point Pelee, and that's always a fun trip. I really enjoy that. And throughout the rest of May was guiding around Alberta, up in Cold Lake, which is a really great destination that I don't know if a lot of people really know about outside of Alberta or Western Canada, but it's a really great spot, and you see all the warblers there, but it's not Lake Pelee where they're all migrating. They're mostly on territory, singing loudly, and they're all in their preferred habitats throughout the forest there. So
that is a fun part about seeing birds on territory during their breeding season.
Yeah, and that's one thing I love about birding in Alberta is we have a lot of breeding species that are accessible for people to get to. Yeah, that's definitely one of the things I enjoy the most about birding in Alberta. I think Out of all the provinces in Canada, Alberta might be the easiest one to see over 300 species in a year in, just because a lot of birds are reliable on territory and you can go and stake them out pretty easily.
Ontario is very big for doing big years, but are there people who have attempted Alberta big years?
I've always said to people, a real dedicated Alberta big year would be really cool to see. And there are a lot of people that get out there and see over 300 species regularly each year. But there's a few species that are always tough to get. And if you have to try for those, I think, if you're going to call it a big year. And they're just at the corners of the province and they barely make it in and they can be really difficult to find. But I'm thinking species like whooping crane up in the Salt Plains and wood buffalo. And you'd have to really go into the Northwest Territories to get up there.
For me, that was the way to see them where they breed, because I've seen them in the winter in Texas, but to see them in Canada during breeding season, that for me was the big thrill.
Yeah, personally, I've actually never been up there, but it's an area I'd like to get up to. It's just tough with everything. Everything is usually good for birding at the same time around here. I'm busy at that time of year, so there's not much wiggle room for a trip up there.
But whooping crane for Alberta?
I do, yeah. I've seen a couple around Calgary, just usually young birds that don't quite go back all the way up to Wood Buffalo National Parks. Or they're summering in southern Alberta. And there was one that was here for a couple months.
Oh, nice.
Last summer, just west of Calgary. And there was one before that, I think, in 2020 down near Frank Lake, south of the city.
So now that you've done Point Pelee, what were your numbers after Pelee?
Yeah, I think I was a bit north of 300 at that point. I don't know exactly, but I think I was around maybe just a little bit higher than 300 at that point. There were still a few things that I didn't see that I was able to catch up with later. Common breeders.
Were you looking ahead to the rest of the year and saying, hey, 400 is possible?
So 400 really until kind of the end of June. And at that point, I think I was close to 380 species. And then I was out of the country for about 6 weeks, and I came back and went to Grand Manan, East Coast, and added a few species there, mainly Wilson's Storm Petrel, Great Shearwater, Corey's Shearwater, and American Oyster Catcher.
That was in 2022. Hearing about an American oyster catcher there got me on a plane to go back there. I didn't really have a way to get to where they were, and I was waiting for a ferry, and because the ferry had broken down on the opposite side, I had a long wait. And as I'm walking around, I see a couple in a motorboat letting off some people with binoculars, and I think they might be birders. Maybe I can ask them if they know about the American oyster catchers out on Bill's Island. And they said, oh yeah, we're from here, and people keep walking up to us asking us to take them out. So we've been doing that all day. And it turned out that Taryn Miller was the record holder for a New Brunswick big year. And that was like one of those nice little coincidences that I got to know her and her husband, and that was fantastic. Are they still on that Bill's Island?
Yeah, they're still on the island. And we actually went out with the same couple that you did. Go find them. Yeah, we ended up Graham and Ann just in the evening, and they were very kind, very helpful, and they were able to take us out. I had a small tour group with me, and they were able to fit everyone on the boat, give everyone life jackets, and take us out to that island, then a little bit out into the bay to see some seabirds. That worked out really well, as I wasn't really realistically expecting to be able to get American Oyster Catcher.
They could start their own American Oyster Catcher tour company, but they were just doing it out of the goodness of their heart, which was incredible. So I want to get back to Churchill, because that is a trip I have not made, and I hear it is one of the great trips that you can do in Canada, and even if you don't care about birds, you've got the polar bears.
Yeah, it was absolutely an unbelievable trip. I really enjoyed it. We were there in June, so it's not really the time of year to see polar bears, so we didn't see any polar bears. But the birding up there was really good. This year, the ice was still mostly frozen out on Hudson Bay. It was jamming the mouth of the river, which resulted in a lot of birds congregating around the mouth of the river. Big flocks of black scoters, surf scoters, white-winged scoters, long-tailed ducks were all very visible there.
And all breeding.
All in breeding plumage, and they were all vocalizing too, which was really interesting. And we saw common loons, Pacific loons, red-throated loons up there. One morning we had 5 little gulls perched on the road, just sitting on the road in front of us.
That's cool.
Yeah, and you're birding in that northern boreal forest, and parasitic Jaegers flying around, and there's shorebirds singing, and it's a completely different atmosphere up there. Out on the subarctic tundra, we had willow ptarmigan, and there's redneck phalaropes in the ponds. It's a really special place. My first time up there, so I was really blown away by it. I think the highlight for us on our last full day in Churchill, we were heading out to a viewpoint near the mouth of the river, and we'd stopped to scan the granary ponds, which there's a road that kind of goes above them, and you can scan down below them. And from that top of the road, I see Bruce DeLabio running from there. So I quickly text him. I'm like, "What are you looking for?" And he just texts back, "Yellow-throated warbler." So at that point, we all got back in the van and back down to the town and in the granary ponds. It took us a while. We had to go stop for breakfast in between, but eventually we were able to find the yellow-throated warbler. It was found by a photography group earlier in the morning. So that was probably one of the highlight birds of the trip. Totally unexpected to see that there. I think it's the farthest north record of that species too.
It's definitely a destination I'm trying to get to, and maybe during polar bear season would be more fun. Now, would you recommend if anyone wants to go to Churchill that they take a tour rather than try and just get there on their own?
It was great to go with the tour. We all met in Winnipeg the night before and then flew up together the next morning. We had a van there that we were able to use for the duration of the trip, and the road network there isn't super extensive, so you're going to a lot of the same places again and again, but it's different every time. Work the tides, and you visit at different times of day. It's different, so it was really great. I had a great time up there, and the group we had was really a nice group too, so it was a really good experience. One thing we did that was really interesting was we went out on a boat into the river, and we were able to get up to these flocks of water birds fairly close. They weren't disturbed. They were just loafing there, and we were able to cruise up right beside them and right next to the ice flows too, so that was really neat to see.
And that's just something you can't see anywhere else.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Churchill's definitely, it's quite accessible too. It's a 2 hour flight from Winnipeg. The accommodation there is good. The infrastructure there is really good for tourism because they get a lot of tourists for the polar bear season.
Mhm.
And it's a downtime for tourism, so it's not really full of people. There are a few other groups there, but we were going to the same restaurants, and you get to know the people by the end of the week that you're there, visiting the same places. And it was a really great experience. The last few years, or decades maybe I should say, it hasn't really been as much on the map for birders just because the Ross's gulls.
One of the reasons I always had wanted to go up there, but I ended up getting a Ross's gull in Quebec. But that's not really a thing there anymore, is it?
No, I want to say the last one was maybe 2015 that was seen there, if my memory serves me right. And it was just, I think, one-off sighting. So they're not reliably breeding up there to be seen by birders anymore. So it's, from that sense, it's not as hot of a destination as it once was. But other than that, the birding there is still really good.
And especially in the summer, if you want to see breeding birds, it's really one of the best places to go. That's why I loved all my trips to the Yukon and Northwest Territories, even parts of the prairie parts of Saskatchewan and Alberta where all the songbirds and sparrows are all breeding. I stopped along the road on my way to see Baird sparrow, and I found a whole bunch of breeding Avocets, and they're pretty angry too if you're walking down the road. Even though you're in the middle of the road, you're nowhere near where their nests are, but they come out on the road like the Bonaparte skulls, and they're not quite as aggressive as the Bonaparte.
Oh yeah, I've had that with marbled godwits and long-billed curlews out on the prairies too. You're just walking around looking for songbirds, and all of a sudden you're under attack.
I had never been attacked by birds before that. When you got back from Churchill, now were you thinking, hey, I want to get up to 400?
I forget where I was by the time I was done with Churchill. That time I had a few days off, so I was just gathering myself again. I'd been on the road guiding for, I think, about 21 days, so I was pretty tired when I got home. So I definitely took a couple days of rest, and then shortly after that, I went out to Vancouver Island on a personal trip to see horned puffin at Triangle Island from Port Hardy, and that added a few birds to my year list for sure too. And I think it was at that point that I was thinking, okay, been close to 400 before this year. It might look like I can actually do it if I don't miss some of these things on my next trips out to the East Coast. So I think it was after that trip where I more realized that it was a possibility.
Besides the oyster catchers, what were some of your favorite destinations and birds on the East Coast?
I went up to Newfoundland with some friends in early July, and my main target species for that trip was thick-billed murre, as it was a lifer for me. So thick-billed murre, I think, was probably one of my favorites, and also just being in Newfoundland, I really enjoy being there. And one thing that always gets me every time there is just the density of yellow-bellied flycatchers on the island. Hearing yellow-bellied flycatchers just at seemingly random spots along the road, right? So that's a really tough bird to get out here. So it's nice to see them like that there.
Certainly, some of the birds that I saw on the East Coast were quite spectacular. I made a special trip for the Stellar Sea Eagle. I was going to ask you about if you were there at the right time to chase it.
Yeah, I didn't end up chasing it. I was there with some friends too, and they'd already tried for it a couple times unsuccessfully. And I'd already seen it before on a trip in 2022 that I did out there. Yeah, and it's decisions like that for me, not chasing those things, which is why I say it's not really much of a big year per se. I think if I were doing a big year, it would have been all out and I would have been targeting, and I still would be. It's still 2024, and I'm not too bothered that I haven't seen a short-eared owl yet this year. If I see one, great. If I don't, that's just the way it is.
Is your guiding finished for the year, or do you still have more trips?
Right now, I have a couple months off. I'm working on finishing. For the last year and a bit, I've been writing a new field guide for the birds of Alberta together with David Scott, and we're just coming to the end of the first draft in that process now. So I've been dedicating a lot of time to that. So I have another few months. I guess November and December are pretty empty for me in that sense, but starting in January again, it gets pretty busy, and that'll pretty much last all the way through to October. So it'll be a busy year again, but it's nice to have a little bit of time at home at the end of the year after being on the road a number of days.
Have you calculated how many days this year you've been on the road?
No, and I don't know if I really want to.
I'm a statistics and numbers and list freak, so I had to calculate every single day I was away from home during my big year. So tell me about your education and how you got into birding and how your education is fueling your future.
Yeah, so I got into birding at a young age. My dad was a biologist and worked on birds, mostly grouse and waterfowl. So growing up, it was always something that was around. And my parents took me to Point Pelee when I was young and went out birding there and got hooked and never really stopped since then. Yeah, I've been birding since I was 7.
Your very first bird that made you think, wow, this is awesome and I want to see more.
I don't know if there was a particular spark bird, but I think just seeing scarlet tanagers and Baltimore orioles and yellow warblers and those birds, that really got me going, and went home that week and I just continued to look for those. Yeah, that's how it all got started.
You've obviously chosen a career that will keep you birding. What is your education in?
So I have a diploma in renewable resource management from Lethbridge College. And so I went there with the intention of going more into the environmental consulting field after school. But as I was there, the opportunities for me in guiding started to really come to light, and it started to take off for me. So I decided partway through I was probably going to go with that route, at least for the time being, and I have no regrets so far. I really enjoy it, and it's been a really great choice for me so far.
That's pretty exciting, especially the fact that you are working on a field guide. And is this sort of a new modern endeavor that the both of you are embarking on?
Yeah, it's more of a new edition, or it's really a new guide. There hasn't been a field guide published in Alberta since I want to say 1998. So it's been 25 plus years since one has been published, and a lot's changed in our knowledge of birds in Alberta in that time. And what's different about this guide is we're sourcing photos from people. About 90% of the photos in the book were taken in Alberta, and the other ones were from around North America. But we're trying to source photos from Alberta and really display good identification characteristics in the book too. It's been a really rewarding process. It's definitely time consuming, but we're finishing up writing the species accounts now.
And when do you expect it to be on the shelves?
Right now, we're anticipating spring 2026. It needs to still go through editing and design and all the kind of behind the scenes publishing.
I assume that you leave room for, just before publishing, for the occasional split or lump.
Yeah, we'll have a little wiggle room with name changes and changes in the order of taxonomy and that sort of thing to make some changes that way. It's the nature of field guides that when you publish it in a few months or a year, it's already going to be out of date. We hope to keep it updated and come out with new editions periodically as things change more drastically, hopefully sooner than 25 years after.
That is a long wait. I think that's cool that you can be involved in that. It's definitely something that with the internet is overlooked, having good field guides.
Yeah, for sure.
And you were just talking about name changes. There is some big discussion going on with bird names that are named after people that have nothing to do with the field marks of a bird. Are you involved in your local bird review board?
No, I'm not involved in those discussions on what the name changes will eventually end up being.
Where are those decisions being made at the highest ranks of birding?
I think it was the AOS.
Yeah, I always wondered why there are birds that have names that really describe the bird and makes yellow-throated warbler, you know what you're looking for, but you hear Baird sparrow and you're like, what's a Baird sparrow?
Yeah.
And especially for new birders. And I started in 2012. These random names didn't really help educate me very well.
No, and even some of the names that are supposedly a little descriptive, ringneck duck or red-bellied woodpecker, aren't necessarily
very helpful.
Very helpful either, yeah, exactly.
I am of the opinion that the ringneck duck should be changed to the ring-billed duck. If you saw that, you'd say, oh, there's a ring-billed duck.
Yeah, I have no issues with that one.
So what else would you like to mention about your guiding company that we can share with people so that they can look you up when they are in Alberta?
Yeah, so my website is meadowlarkbirding.com. I do day trips out of Calgary. I can arrange any kind of itinerary throughout Alberta or Western Canada for people that are looking to come out here and visit. But I do a few set departure tours a year throughout Canada and internationally as well. Keeps me pretty busy.
What are some of your international destinations?
In January, we're going to Colombia. I have 3 tours there, all back to back, so about 3 weeks in Colombia. And then I'm going to Morocco in April, and in the fall, Costa Rica. I was just in Kenya in July and August this year, and that was a really wonderful trip. It was definitely one of my favorite birding destinations that I've been to. So,
care to share what your world life list is with all these incredible trips you take?
My world life, it's just north of 2,000.
Of all the people you've met on all these trips, have there been a few memorable meetings of birders that you've had only heard about or read about?
A lot of the times these trips you're isolated with your group, so you're with that group, and a lot of the time we maybe have been the only people at the lodge, right? So you're not necessarily meeting a lot of other people. But I've been to this past summer. I was at the Global Bird Fair in the UK, and I went down to the Cape May Festival in October, just this past October. So I was able to meet some people there, and both those opportunities are really great to meet a lot of people who I've heard of before or have communicated with before, but never actually met in person.
Yeah, I've just been lucky to have run into so many of the people I've read about and read their books and field guides. And for me, meeting Neil Hayward in Texas was pretty exciting. He broke all-time record for the ABA in 2013, and in 2016, I got to meet him. So that was cool. But that's what I find fun about all the travel I used to do, is all the different birders I would meet and just learning so much from the people that I encountered. We did go to Texas and High Island in late April to enjoy spring migration there, but we did not get the fabled fallout that everybody always hopes for when you go to High Island. Have you been down there?
I was down there, I guess, April 2023, and did a bit of a road trip down there, and started off in El Paso and went down to Big Bend for Kalima Warbler.
How does that hike for you compare to some of the hiking in BC and Alberta?
I didn't find it in terms of difficulty, I didn't find it particularly strenuous. It was fine. We went up early. I think we were probably the first people up the trail, and got up to where they were, just pretty much heard a Kalima Warbler singing immediately, spent a little bit of time there, and then headed back down. It's a beautiful area too. It's a really nice park there. Wish we would have had more time to spend there, but we were on a pretty set itinerary going to hill country the next day. Yeah, it's a really cool area there. But I really enjoy Texas. I think it's probably my favorite state to be birding in. Yeah, I really enjoyed birding in the Rio Grande Valley. We're lucky enough to be there and see brown jays at the Santa Margarita Ranch. It was being in the right place at the right time for those, for sure. And they had been continuing there for a while. Yeah, they were coming into feeders, so it's not difficult to find them when we saw them there. But then I also spent a couple days up near Houston, near the Galveston coast, and it was really nice birding there too. It felt a little bit more like what I'm used to birding in Eastern Canada with the warblers coming through. I mean, it's different species, but it felt more like the same style of birding than down in the Rio Grande Valley, which felt a little more tropical.
So back to 2024. The last time I checked, I saw you were at like 402 or 403. What are you at now?
Yeah, I think I'm at 403 right now. I was out birding with a friend of mine this last weekend. We had a gyrfalcon fly by. We were looking at rosy finches, and gyrfalcon came right down, right below eye level, and just flew over an open field. So that was my latest addition for the year.
What do you see that you'll be able to end up with?
Depends on what I end up going for. As I said, I still need short-eared owl. I still need white-tailed ptarmigan, which I could get up in the Rockies here. November is usually the best time to see them up in the Highwood Pass area near Calgary. in Kananaskis, just southwest of Calgary there. But there's also birds like fish crow, which when I'm back in Ontario at the end of the year, I might be able to see. Yeah, I feel like if you were doing an Ontario or Canada big year, that's one that you would be really counting on to see.
Now that you've hit 400, I wish you luck getting to 410 or beyond. That's a pretty big number for Canada because not that many people get there. The only other person I know, she's a BC birder, Monica Nugent.
Yeah, Monica actually, she came on my Cold Lake tour this year. She's wonderful.
Thank you very much for taking the time. This was an enjoyable chat. I'm really glad that we're able to take time out from your birding and guiding. Good luck with the book. That sounds something that's going to definitely keep you busy for the next year, and see how much travel you can do and if you can get a higher number next year than this year.
Yeah, and I wouldn't actually be surprised if I did, looking at my schedule. It's a lot of the same, plus I'm going to be in the Okanagan a couple times.
Good luck the rest of the year.
Thanks for taking the time to talk to me.
You're welcome. Take care.
Yeah, you too.
Well, thank you once again for joining me on the Big Year podcast. Hopefully I can get the next episode out without a delay. And my guests will be Ethan and Ingrid Whitaker, who shattered the all-time record for a lower 48 big year. And we'll find out how they did it as a team, as I've noticed that there are some birders who go it alone and some birders who make it a family affair, as Robert and Natasha did. And it'll be fun to learn about how Ethan and Ingrid planned their lower 48 big year and what it took to break the all-time record. Of course, Tiffany Kirsten had set the big year record for the lower 48, temporarily anyway, but she went it alone. And in the meantime, I'm going to go birding and see what June has to offer. In fact, this weekend, Sue and I will be going to the Huron Fringe Birding Festival, and hopefully I'll pick up a few species that I missed along the way in May. And if you haven't been to the Huron Fringe Birding Festival, it is known as Pelee North. The difference is in Pelee, they are migrating through, but at the Huron Fringe Birding Festival, you're liable to find lots of nesting birds and birds that you may have missed because you weren't in the right place the right time during spring migration. In fact, for me, I'm embarrassed to say this, but somehow I have not seen a Wilson's Warbler this year, and that's a little bit frustrating, but I am bound to find one this weekend. Until the next time, thank you very much for joining me. Please tell all your friends about how wonderful this podcast is, and that any birder of any skill level, whether they've done big years or not, can enjoy hearing the stories of other birders who have done big years and some of the birders who have not. So get out there, get your binoculars, polish your lenses, and find a rare bird for me to chase, because that's what I'm looking forward to most this summer. Bye-bye, take care, and don't wait 1 minute when you hear of a rare bird sighting. Get in the car and go, go, go. But don't speed, please, don't speed. Thank you. Bye-bye. The podcast, and today we have a lovely guest whose name is not registering in my mind, so I actually had to look it up. It'll be fun to see. It'll be fun to learn about how, of course, what why can't I find her? I'm just looking things up right now because I can't remember their names. Let's see. Isn't it terrible that I'm recording here? I don't, let me start again. Maybe. I'd have loved to have had Sue along for the ride for most of my big year, but unfortunately, the kind of travel I do with the lack of destinations built into the itinerary was not her cup of tea. When she did come with me to the East Coast and to Point Pelee, she made the reservations, and I'm just blathering on right now, so I'm just going to edit this out. You won't even hear any of this. Bye-bye.